Okay, this video should be pretty short and sweet. So we're on the front page of your notes, and we are at the part where it says independent and dependent variable. So when we're talking independent and dependent variable, we've already talked about how on a graph, this is your X, this is your Y, and I said this is independent, and your Y is your dependent. And that will always be the situation every time we make a graph the entire year, and we'll make lots of them. So here's your definition. It says, in a relation, the value of the variable that determines the output is called the independent variable. Then it says, this will always be represented on the blank axis. We already said this, our x-axis. And it's also known as your input. Again, that's review information. We've said that several times. So your independent variable is on your x-axis, and it's called your input. So that's the information you're putting in, and then that is going to determine the next part. When we are making graphs, and next week when we do graphing stories, you're going to use one variable very often, and a very common example of an independent variable is time. Time is independent. You can't change time. Time's just happening. Some of you are probably getting sciencey and thinking, oh, we've talked about this in science before. Absolutely. You've talked about independent and dependent variables in science, and you've made graphs. So after you have independent variable, we're moving down to the next box. It says the variable with the value that is dependent on the value of the independent value is called the dependent variable. I know when I read that, it makes absolutely no sense, and it sounds like we're just repeating words. But the thing you need to know is the independent variable is the thing that stands alone, and then the dependent variable is determined based on what the independent variable does. This is always going to be on your y-axis, and it's also known as your output. Examples of things that you're going to see commonly when we make our graphs that we're going to put on the y-axis: money. Whether you're spending money or you're making money, money is usually dependent, usually. Another really good example is distance traveled. So an example where we could talk about independent and dependent variable. If Ms. Heflin has a job at Quick Trip and she makes $10 an hour, the more hours she works, time, the more money she's gonna make, money. Time is independent, and then the money I make is dependent on my time, which is your dependent variable. If you go to the next page, you have several example problems. I want you, before you watch the next video, part 2 of this, I want you to see if you can identify the independent and dependent variable in each situation. After you do that part, then watch the next video and I'll give you the answers.